This is the Simpit Driving School. I'm your instructor for the day, Shaun, and for today's show, we are going to take our first step or our first look at doing setups for the car. Now, this is really just a beginner's tutorial, some very first steps on how to find a little more out of the car right when you get going. I'm going to tell you right now, I am not a setup guru. There are people who specialize at setting up the car, looking at the data, and getting everything out of the car. That is not me, and that's probably not most of you either, but I think a lot of people get into sim racing and they just don't even know where to go, where to start, what to do first, how to even look at setup or even grasp the concept. So in today's show, I just want to give you a few pointers, especially in iRacing specific, and I gotta admit, whether you're talking different sims, different cars, different drivers, setup is not all for one for all. Everybody has a unique way of doing it, and everybody has a different setup that's going to work best for them. And when you change cars, each car has different parameters, different things that you can change. Some have wing, some don't. Some have gearing, some don't. So what I'm really looking at is the first basic 1, 2, 3. And for today's example, I'm using the new 911 GT3 Cup in iRacing. And I'm just going to give you a few things that I would do when looking at this car. This week, that car is actually running at Okayama. And so let's go ahead and take a look at the setup options that we have for the 911. We do have air pressure, and you can see all that right here on this screen. And then on the next screen, we have ARB in the front, anti-roll bar blades, like how stiff is our roll bar. Brake bias, toe in. We have some spring perch and camber adjustments for the front. In the rear, we have spring perch and camber, toe in, fuel, roll bar in the rear, and finally our wing setting. So those are the changes that we can make. Right now I do have the baseline setup loaded up, and the first thing I'm going to do, and the first thing I would advise everybody, and I can tell you that iRacing does have a few changes I'd make even without going on track, but I'm going to go through more of the procedure to give you an idea of how you handle it. So let's go ahead and just take the car out real quick, and I'm going to fast forward a lot of this so that you don't have to endure it. But what I am doing is I'm taking the car out. This is Okayama. I do know the track. I do know this car, but I haven't driven this scenario. And I'm using the baseline setup right now. And I'm just going to go and get the car out. I'm going to get the tires warmed up. And what I want to do is start trying to feel what the car is doing. Rather than focusing on lap times, right now I'm focusing on my driving line, really making sure that I do my best to keep the car where it belongs on the track so that I'm getting a really good reading of how the car is handling the track. And rather than push it, I really want to find out what the car is doing. When I'm under braking, I want to be sensitive of the braking. I want to be sensitive of the weight transfer of the car. I want to be sensitive of any weird habits. Like, I don't know if you noticed right there, there's a little kick out under braking. Did that happen from brakes or did that happen from suspension? We'll get to the bottom of those kind of things. Whoops. The other thing is you do need to do a few laps to get a good temperature reading, and you don't want to do too much slipping and sliding. I mean, you do want to drive the car the way you're going to drive it in the race, but you definitely don't want to overdo it, because if you crash, you just ruined your entire practice session. And the point right now is to get a feel for the car, get a feel for what it's doing, where it's oversteer, where it's understeer. And then equally as importantly, looking at what our tires are doing after doing a few laps. So I'm going to take it really conservatively at first. Whoa. Even trying to be conservative, you're going to find some things. Right there, I noticed it's really, really touchy under braking. Really touchy. Feels pretty good on exit. The car is a little bit loose if you get too much on the gas and too much steering input, but it's drivable. That actually isn't a terrible combination because it allows me to really, as a driver, handle the car with the gas pedal and the steering input rather than being stuck with something overly loose or overly tight. And again, it's been a while since I've been at Okayama. I think last time I drove here I was in the Miata. I really shouldn't be talking right now because it just makes it that much harder to concentrate on driving well. Car really doesn't want to turn much there, I noticed. And right off the bat, I'm on the fuel screen, and I can tell you a default baseline setup from iRacing usually comes with a full tank or something pretty close. And the races in this car are not nearly that long. I could probably get by with about a half a tank. So that's one change we can make. That's going to find us a lot of speed. If you're not changing the fuel to the appropriate amount, you're really carrying some extra weight around the track. Really touchy under braking still. So this is our third lap right now. Probably starting to get the temperatures up there. Ultimately, I'd probably like to do about 5 laps. And again, right now I'm driving a good driving line, or a decent driving line. And I am, well, trying to really drive the car the way I want to drive it to find out how it's handling. Now I am getting used to that touchy brake and giving the appropriate amount, so I have to remember that the braking was touchy. I can't hide that fact as a driver. Alright, we'll do one more lap. Didn't really make that apex, did I? A little loose on exit on that corner. Had to do my own ABS brakes there. Alright, there we go. That should be enough laps to get an idea what the tires are doing. So now what we want to do is we want to make a mental note of what we felt out of the car. So now what we really want to do is make a mental note of what we felt out of the car. You heard me mention it a few times. You saw me getting a little twitchy under braking. So something needs to be figured out there. As I mentioned, the iRacing tends to come with tires overinflated. So the first thing I'm going to look at is my tires. They're the easiest thing. And, the tires are where we get most of the handling from the car. They offer suspension with how much air pressure. They offer how much rubber is on the road with how much camber we're using on it. So that is one of the most important and critical things. So let's look at our tires and see what they're doing. When I look at my tires, looking at the front first, I can see the inside edges are a lot hotter than the outside edges. On the right front, I'm looking at a 35-degree difference, and on the left front, I'm looking at a 28-degree difference. And you can notice that the inside edges are wearing quite a bit extra. So in general, I've noticed that just about every car, looking at the rears, you can see that the rear end, same thing. We have a 41-degree spread on the right. We have a 32-degree spread on the left. So you can see the way the car is being affected by the track there as well. So, as I mentioned, iRacing tends to always overinflate the tires. And what I'm going to do is right off the bat, when you look here at my left front, you can see it's 149 on the outside edge, and it's 99% wear. The middle is at 173, which is almost as hot as the inside edge, which is an indication that we are overinflated. That number should be closer to in the middle of those two numbers. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and take 3 pounds out. And I'm actually going to take 3 pounds out all the way, because when we look, you'll notice that all of our middle temperatures are nearly as hot as our inside edges. So we're going to go ahead and take 3 pounds out all the way around the car, and that should do quite a bit for us. The other thing, looking at it, is we have a big degree of change in the front, and I'm really twitchy under steering. You can see what I did was, when I let the air pressure out, we made the car too low. So now we're going to have to adjust things to make that right. Now, spring perches adjust where the spring is in relation to the body. And if I move the spring up, that drops the body down. Or if I move the spring down, perch down, it moves the car up. So in this case, I actually need to move the perches down in order to raise the car height. So I'm just going to put one click all the way around the car real quick and see if we can't get this back into tech. Let's go a second click all the way around. Looks like we got the front end where it needs to be. And when we raise the rear end a little, it might lower that front end a little too. We're getting there. You can see what it's doing to the car as far as that goes. Now our front's just a little bit low, so we're going to do that. So now we've adjusted the ride height to compensate for the lower air pressure. Now the other thing I did notice is that our inside edges were really wearing harder than our outside, which to me is an indication that our tires are sitting like this and not working the ground nearly as much as we need to. So we're going to flatten them out a little bit more and get a little more rubber on the road. And that might automatically help us as far as that sketchiness under braking. It could have just been really locking them up too easily because of that. So I'm going to knock this down to minus 2.7 on both sides. The other thing is we had way too much gas. It had 26.4. Let's lower that to half and go 13.2. And we'll have to double check that for our actual race setting. So right there, the two changes that we really have made to this car so far, well, three really. We've done air pressure, we've done camber, and we've done fuel. And this is going to make a big difference between what we already drove. And I can tell you that without even driving it. And then we're going to go back out. And one thing I'll show you real quick is a lot of people forget or don't realize how to save. So here I have a save button, and I can save my setup. Let's go ahead and call this baseline SMC, and then let's label it for Okayama. All right, and then we'll go ahead and give this a try. Take this out for a handful of laps and see how it does. Well, the fuel load is really paying off. I can tell the car is a little bit more stable under braking. That could be the camber, it could be the lighter car. I'm also noticing it has a lot better mid-corner grip. Again, I'm pretty happy with the way it's getting off the corner, a little bit loose. I feel like it's still a little tight in certain spots. Oh, I pushed the braking. Oh, see, you don't want to do that. That's a good way to screw up your reading on your temperature. I just locked up all the wheels. Right there is where it's tight. That's the spot that if I made it any tighter, it'd be hard to get through that corner. You know, so I'll talk a little bit while I drive here. You know, one thing what you can see is my procedure. It was going out on track and being sensitive to what the car is doing as a driver, and coming in with some preconceived ideas in my head of what was wrong or missing. Beyond that, I'm looking at my tire temps and trying to look and see what the car is doing. And then I'm going to use those two things and I'm going to make some adjustments. When I go out for my next drive, I'm going to see if I've improved the car in those areas, and at the same time, see if I've created any new ill effects of the car. We made that ride height adjustment. That could have come back to haunt us. In this case, I think the car is feeling overall better. And I'm not so much worried about my lap times yet, because I'm still not quite to that level of consistency with my driving line. I'm still not to the point where I'm really overly pushing it or have total confidence in the car yet even. Pushed it too hard. Still under braking. That's my biggest problem. So let's finish this lap and then take a look at things. Oh, Shaun, that just totally screwed everything up right there. You want to avoid doing that, because what I just did was increased my rear tire temps by an amount that's going to kind of skew my readings here. So that's not fair. And that's why you want to underdrive, not overdrive on your, checking out the car lap. So looking at our tire temps, let's look at what our adjustments did to the car. And you can see here that we're still a little overinflated on these tires. It is still really hot up at the middle point. And we have not really changed our wear on the inner edge all that much. Our temperature spread is a little bit less, it looks like. So here we're at 19 degrees, and here we're at, I can't do math right now, 22. So I would say we're actually pretty good on the camber, but still overinflated. So I'm going to take another pound out here. Rear end, still overinflated. And usually you'll want a little bit less of a spread in the rear. So right now we're looking at 26 over here, 34. That could be because of that last minute spin that I did. So I do see that we're still overinflated, so we're going to take another pound out. We're all the way down to 18 pounds, 4 pounds lower. Now the biggest problem, and you can see I now need to make another adjustment in my ride height in order to pass tech. So there we go. I'm keeping everything really square. I'm not doing anything radical with different settings on each corner. I'm keeping it flat and square, as I like to call it. So right now what I want to look at is my brake pressure. And right now our pressure is only 47% to the front. And we're getting that kick out, which could be a lot from the rear end's locking up and pivoting the car. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this to 49% and see if that makes any adjustment for us. The other thing we can see is that our rear end is still showing a little too much negative camber for the rear end. So I'm going to take that one down to 2.5 and leave it right there. Again, so what am I focusing on? We've been focusing on air pressure, camber, ride height, and brake pressure. So let's go ahead and save that setup here. And I can save that as a second version if I'm not sure if these changes are going to help me. But you might want to keep some notes on some of the changes you're making. And there are programs that'll help you do some of this stuff, or you can do it just by feel like I'm doing. You know, we could be using Atlas, we could be using Motec, but that would be more of an advanced setup guide than... Alright, so we'll just take it out for one more run. Still haven't done anything that's going to help that corner much. Still having trouble under braking, but it's better. It's not as twitchy. Well, I'm still locking up the brakes a lot, but the car is more stable. It's not nearly as scary under braking. It's definitely got more corner speed than we had at the beginning. We definitely have more straight line speed than we had at the beginning with the fuel changes. We should be getting better tire wear as a result of those changes. And with these small changes, I have a car that is mostly drivable and heavily improved. This corner right here is the only corner that I'd still work on the car, but it might screw up somewhere else. Ooh. So let's go ahead and take a last look at our tires. All right, so now when we take a look, what we see is we're still a little inflated, but at some point we'll start getting just too soft on the tires. You can see it's a little bit more even wear across the tires. And then on top of that, what you can see, if you look at the overall average temps and compare front to rear, you can see we have a really good balance. And we're not overworking the fronts where they're 200 and the rear are only 170 or vice versa. But we have that nice spread, about 170 degrees average for all four tires, which shows a pretty good handling car. That last change with brake bias definitely settled the car down and made it better. And so with just a few changes, we've gotten a little more out of this car. I mean, if we wanted to go into great detail, we could, but then we'd have to call it our medium level setup guide. This is really just a beginner's guide, just a 1, 2, 3, a few quick steps that you could do and be race ready. If I had taken that default setup into the race, it would have been at least a full second slower. Let's look at our lap times. We started off in the 39s, well, 32.984 was the best in my first session, 32.9, and in the end we were down to a 31.625. Some of that was getting familiar with the car and track, some of it was just driving well and hard, but we did improve a few other things. We improved tire wear, we improved tire temps, we improved overall handling, we improved our braking, and we did that in just a few steps. And by getting the right fuel load, I didn't really check how many laps we were really going, but you want to minimize your fuel and get it to the point where you have a safe enough amount to finish whatever race you're in, but not any more than you need to, because fuel is very heavy and you don't want to carry that extra weight. You don't want to, it hurts you on acceleration and it hurts you under mid-corner cornering speed, and that's just too much of a loss to handle. So definitely get the fuel load right. So I hope this helps you. Again, this is just a beginner's guide. We didn't look at any real data. We didn't really over-define or really cure any big problems. This was just something you can do to the baseline setup to get just enough competency and speed to be able to hang in a regular pack with the race. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. This is the Simpit Driving School. I'm your instructor, Shaun Cole, and I'll see you on the track.